Let's take a closer look at how to fully create a new listener. This also involves generating the labels we're going to use. We're going to use a listener that is already created, but in the previous video we saw how to fill in these fields. And in this case, we can also see which options we have selected. For instance, port 2222 with the TCP protocol, and we're telling it to auto-detect the events, meaning it will automatically find the end of an event. Now, if we go to the Labels tab, as you may remember from some of the definitions we provided earlier, one of them was label, which allows us to categorize the information coming into a listener so it can be processed appropriately. Essentially, labels are just tags that we create on a listener for events that meet specific conditions. When we create a filter or a condition, we can select the fields on which we want to base that condition, choosing from fields in the syslog header, the message, or information like source IP and source port. For conditions, we can select that a string contains a certain value, that it is equal to a specific value, or that it matches a regular expression. Regular expressions are a bit heavier on your system, but they're available if needed, and when simpler conditions like contains or equals aren't enough. We can define as many conditions as necessary, each with its own criteria, and if you look closely, some can have sub-labels or be structured in a hierarchy. In this case, after the main label, for example the one with just a letter, is evaluated, it then checks the condition labelled with numbers, for example 1, 2, each adding a new filter. These numeric filters correspond with the label shown above, so for an event to match this label, it must meet both conditions. It's important to note that conditions at the same level are combined using AND logic. They must all be true. OR logic isn't implemented at this level. Instead, it's achieved by including the condition in separate labels. One important thing to keep in mind with labels is how they are evaluated. When events come in, all labels at the same level are checked simultaneously. For example, A, B, C, D, E, all letters are evaluated in parallel. So if an event matches more than one label or condition, it will be assigned to all matching labels. That means a single event can be processed by multiple pipelines if it satisfies their respective label conditions. We need to be aware of this when defining labels to ensure they uniquely target the events we want to process. This is different for hierarchical labels. In that case, labels at a deeper level are only checked if the parent condition is true. For example, here the matches or contains condition on the tag will only be evaluated once the hostname equals Microsoft. One more important detail. In the case of syslog, though it applies to all listeners, there is always an all data label, which, as the name implies, includes all information received by that listener. There's also an unlabeled label, which catches all events that don't match any of the specified conditions. So if an event doesn't match any of the defined conditions, it will go to this label. It's often useful to route this label to a pipeline to collect uncategorized data. In the case of syslog, there's also an unparsed category, which identifies events whose headers do not conform to either of the two syslog RFC standards, 3164 and 5424. If they don't comply, maybe due to unexpected characters or mismatched schema, they'll be routed here. However, we can still build labels here just as we would in the all data category and view all the information. This unparsed category exists only in syslog and not in other listeners. This allows us to begin working with the data arriving through this listener.